It started with sirens, bright red and blue flashing through my frosted windows like a twisted version of Christmas lights. I was halfway through stringing the last of my rooftop display when the cruisers rolled in. Not one. Three. 3 police cars idling right in front of my house, engines humming under the quiet fall of snow. It wasn't even dark yet. I remember looking down from my ladder, staple gun still in hand, blinking through the shock. The officers got out slowly. They weren't in any hurry, but their posture said this was serious. One had his hand near his holster. Another was scanning my yard like I'd planted landmines under the inflatable snowman. I climbed down slowly, my heart thudding in time with the crunch of their boots on the driveway. "Sir," the lead officer called out, "we received a 911 call about an aggressive individual making threats in this residence." I nearly laughed, but the cold look in his eye froze the chuckle in my throat. "Aggressive? Threats? Officer, I've been up on this ladder for an hour decorating for Christmas." He didn't smile. "Do you have any weapons in the house?" And that's when it hit me. Karen, she lived 3 houses down, the self-proclaimed HOA president, though there was never an official vote. Karen had a clipboard, a fake title, and a grudge against anything joyful. And nothing triggered her more than my holiday lights. Last year she left 4 anonymous notes about blinding the community with vulgarity. I'd toned it down this year. No music, no strobe, just lights. Apparently that was still too much. Before I tell you what happened next, can you drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from? It helps to know there's someone out there who understands how far people like her will go. And hey, if you've ever had a neighbor like this, hit that subscribe button, because trust me, this story only gets worse. My name is Jack Turner. I'm 42. I've lived in this neighborhood for 11 years. Single father of 1 teenage boy, retired military, now working from home in cybersecurity. I follow rules. I don't make waves. But that day, she made it war. After convincing the police I was not, in fact, threatening anyone with a candy cane, I asked them who made the call. They said it was anonymous. But then one of the younger officers made eye contact with me just briefly and shifted his eyes down the street, toward Karen's house. There she was, peeking through her blinds, probably live texting the entire fiasco to her little Facebook coven. I didn't wave, I didn't glare. I just stood there watching her watch me. She wanted a reaction, and I gave her none. That night, after my son Luke came home from school, he saw the half-finished lights and the red in my face. "Let me guess," he said, tossing his backpack on the bench. "Karen?" I nodded. "Called 911 this time." He let out a whistle. "She's escalating." "Not anymore," I said. Because that night I started documenting everything. Every passive-aggressive letter. Every violation notice she slid under my door. Every blurry photo she took of my yard. What she didn't know is, I'd been quietly collecting evidence for months. Ever since last year's HOA meeting where she screamed at an elderly veteran for planting unsanctioned geraniums. I just never thought I'd have to use it. But this time she crossed a line. This time she called the cops, and I was done letting her win. I would light up more than my house. I would light up every single shady thing she'd done. In public. With proof. The snow had stopped falling by morning, but the frost left behind seemed to cling to everything. Especially to my mood. I woke up earlier than usual, even before Luke stirred. My mind was buzzing with everything I'd decided last night. Wasn't just angry anymore. I was focused. I'd served in the military, I knew discipline, I knew strategy, and I knew how to document a threat. First thing I did was install 2 additional outdoor cameras, one on the porch facing Karen's direction, the other angled toward my mailbox. I knew the pattern. She'd always make her move after I made mine. And now, every step I took would be recorded. Afterward, I pulled out the thick manila folder from my closet. Every infraction letter, every copy of our HOA's bylaws, every printed Facebook post from the local group that hinted at her manipulation. I laid them all out on my dining table. This wasn't just neighborly pettiness anymore. This was targeted, harassment, and I knew it was time to draw a line. But I had to play it smart. I couldn't just go public with a bunch of papers and rants. I needed a story, a timeline, a smoking gun. And then I remembered something. 2 months ago, during the annual block cleanup, Karen had loudly bragged to a neighbor that she was adjusting HOA finances this year, and no one would ever notice. At the time, I dismissed it as her usual power trip nonsense, but now I saw the cracks. So I went to the HOA website. Every neighborhood has one. Ours was just outdated. But I found the PDFs, annual budgets, expense reports, meeting notes, except there were missing months, gaps, payments with no recipient name, landscaping fees that were triple the normal rate. I copied everything. Meanwhile, Karen doubled down. The very next day, I got a notice on my door. Not mailed, not emailed, just taped right there, crooked and flapping in the wind. Violation, unauthorized. Lawn ornamentation. It was for the wooden reindeer in my yard. Those reindeer had been there every Christmas since my wife passed away. Luke and I put them up together every year. Part of our healing, part of her memory. I took that paper, walked straight to the reindeer, and stapled the notice right to its antlers. Let her drive by and see it. Let the whole neighborhood see it. That night I received an anonymous email. No text, just a photo attachment, a close-up of my front window, from an angle that meant someone was standing in my yard. I gripped my phone tight. I scanned the street. I didn't see her, but I didn't need. So Karen was pushing the line again, but this time I had cameras. I reviewed the footage. At 2:43 a.m., there she was, black hoodie, clipboard in hand, walking through my front garden. Trespassing. I saved the footage, uploaded it to a cloud drive, copied it to a USB, and then I made a plan. I wouldn't just confront her. I'd make her confront herself. I found the perfect event. The upcoming HOA holiday board meeting. She'd be there, everyone would, including the treasurer, the secretary, and at least a dozen other homeowners. It was scheduled for the community clubhouse, a cramped, overly decorated hall at the end of our cul-de-sac. I circled the date on my calendar, December 19th. I had 10 days. 10 days to build the perfect case. 10 days to show the neighborhood who Karen really was. Luke noticed my late nights at the computer. He noticed the stacks of printouts. "Are you going to war with her?" he asked one night while eating cereal for dinner. I looked up. "I'm going to expose her." He smiled. "Good. She's been ruining everyone's holidays for years." And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't the only one who saw it. The days that followed were quiet. Too quiet. Karen didn't file any more violations, no more weird emails, no more drive-by photos. She was waiting. And on December 19th, I walked into that HOA meeting with a laptop, a projector, and a file folder thicker than my winter gloves. Karen didn't even look at me when I arrived. She was already seated at the center of the long folding table, next to the treasurer and secretary, wearing a bright red blazer and that same smug smile she wore when the cops showed up at my house. But her smile wouldn't last long, because I was about to turn the lights on, and this time it wasn't going to be Christmas lights, it was going to be the truth. The room was buzzing with low conversation and the hum of the weak clubhouse heater. Folding chairs squeaked as neighbors shifted in place, sipping lukewarm coffee from paper cups. I stood in the back for a moment, scanning the room. About 30 residents had shown up, more than usual. I wasn't the only one tired of Karen's reign. Luke was with me. I told him he didn't have to come, but he insisted. "Someone's got to witness the fireworks," he'd said, half joking, but I knew he meant it. I walked up front calmly, placed my laptop on the side table usually used for raffle prizes, and gave a polite nod to the treasurer. She looked at me nervously, then glanced at Karen, who was busy tapping her pen like a Morse code machine. Her smile didn't falter. She saw my laptop and the small portable projector. Her eyes narrowed, but only for a second. I waited for the formalities. Karen welcomed everyone in her usual syrupy voice. thanked the cookie volunteers, and then dove into the agenda. Before we get to open floor, she said, I'd like to briefly remind residents that holiday displays must adhere to the HOA's guidelines. We've received several complaints about excessive brightness and yard clutter. I raised my hand. She paused, visibly irritated. Mr. Turner, this isn't the open floor yet. Respectfully, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. What I have to present affects everyone in this room. It won't take long. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Karen smiled tightly. Fine, you have 3 minutes. I'll try to keep it to 2. I plugged in the projector. The wall behind her filled with the image of my front yard, taken from my security camera. Karen's figure was clear, hoodie, clipboard, flashlight beam sweeping across my window. Gasps. This was taken on December 10th, I began. 2:43 a.m. That's my yard, that's my window, and that's Karen. Trespassing. Karen's expression cracked, only slightly. I was doing a property inspection. At 2:43 in the morning, a few chuckles. One man near the back muttered, She's lost it. I clicked to the next slide, a scan of the anonymous email. Metadata traced the IP address to the HOA admin account. More murmurs. I didn't send that, Karen snapped. I never said you did. But the account belongs to the HOA, and only 3 people have access. You, the treasurer, and the secretary. So if it wasn't you, maybe we need to investigate deeper. The treasurer and secretary both shifted uncomfortably. I clicked again. A spreadsheet comparison. HOA landscaping charges over the past 3 years. A column highlighted in red showed payments tripling under Karen's self-assigned term. I also contacted the landscaping company, I said. They say they've only been paid for half of what the HOA budget shows. So where did the rest go? The room went silent. Karen stood up. This is a smear campaign. He's using doctored files. I have emails from the landscaping company. I have original invoices. And I have proof that our bylaws require a formal vote for any leadership change. That vote never happened. You're not our president, Karen. You never were. She was shaking now. Not with fear, with rage. You think you can just take over? She hissed. No, I said. I think the neighborhood should decide. I turned to the crowd. If you've ever received an unfair violation, raise your hand. Over half the room lifted their hands. If you've ever felt harassed, threatened, or stalked in your own neighborhood, raise your hand. Even more went up. Karen turned red. This is a mutiny. You're all just bitter and lazy and— Enough, the treasurer cut in. Karen, sit down. She didn't move. Sit. Down, the secretary echoed. She slowly lowered herself into the chair, eyes darting from face to face like a cornered animal. The treasurer turned to me. Jack, would you be willing to submit all this to the HOA board officially? I already did, I said. Everyone in this room has a copy in their inbox right now. Phones buzzed. People checked their screens. The room turned. And Karen finally saw it. She wasn't feared anymore. She was finished. But I wasn't done. Just one more thing, I said. If anyone else here has been threatened, if you've received photos, anonymous letters, false violation claims, I'm setting up a shared legal complaint. You don't have to stand alone. A quiet voice near the window spoke. She threatened to fine me for my kid's tricycle. Another. She called animal control on my seeing-eye dog. More. She told me if I didn't vote her way, she'd find a reason to fine me every week. Karen looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. I shut the laptop, packed the projector. Luke gave me a grin and a pat on the back, and as I walked out into the crisp December air, the clubhouse behind me alive with voices finally free to speak. I knew this was only the beginning, because Christmas was still coming, and I had one final gift to give her, a very public one. The room was so quiet you could hear the cheap plastic clock ticking behind the HOA banner. 12 homeowners sat in folding chairs, arms crossed or tucked tight, their breath fogging slightly in the drafty clubhouse. The fluorescent lights above flickered once. Karen sat at the front like she owned the place. Clipboard in hand, smiled tighter than her crimson blazer. I stood near the projector with my laptop already connected. No one said a word when I walked in, but the air shifted. People noticed, especially Karen. She opened the meeting like a queen addressing her subjects. Thank you, neighbors, for coming tonight. As your acting president until the next vote, I want to go over our guidelines for decorum, community standards, and seasonal decor violations. Actually, I cut in. I'd like to present something before we start. Karen blinked. Excuse me? I clicked the remote. The projector lit the wall behind her. First slide. A photo of her walking through my front yard at 2:43 a.m., clipboard in hand, clearly visible. There was a low gasp from the room. What is this? Karen snapped. Security footage, I said calmly. From last week. That's you trespassing. She scoffed. This is completely out of context. Slide 2. A close-up of the violation notice she'd taped to my door. The one citing, my reindeer, decor we'd had for years. Out of context, I repeated. Or part of a pattern. Karen stood, her hands fluttering near the clipboard. This meeting isn't about personal vendettas. Slide 3. A side-by-side of the HOA's official expense report and the PDF she altered. Highlighted were inflated fees, missing months, and a $5,000 payment to a consultant that no one could identify. Does anyone remember voting on a landscaping consultant? I asked the room. No one did. The treasurer squirmed. The secretary frowned. Homeowners began murmuring. Karen's voice rose shrill. You can't prove any of this. Slide 4. A screenshot of the Facebook post from 2 months ago where she bragged about adjusting HOA finances. Her profile photo smiled smugly next to the words. Oh, I can, I said. Then I clicked again. Slide 5 was a video. Footage of her yelling at Mr. Hensley last spring. He was a 78-year-old veteran in tears as she cited him for unauthorized potted plants. The room watched in stunned silence as she berated him, waving her clipboard like a weapon. When it ended, no one moved. I turned to the group. This is what she does to all of us. I have a folder here of over 30 similar incidents: unlawful fines, harassment, selective enforcement. She's weaponized the HOA, and it's time we voted to remove her. Karen's mouth opened, but nothing came out. The treasurer looked at her, then at me. I vote yes. The secretary followed. Yes. Then hands went up, one by one. All 12. Unanimous. Karen slammed her clipboard down. This isn't legal. You can't just strip me of authority like this. You were never elected, I replied. You appointed yourself. Then I unplugged the projector and walked out. I didn't need applause. I didn't need thanks. I just needed the silence, the kind that follows a storm. That night, Luke was already asleep when I got home. I sat down on the couch, staring at the half-finished decorations outside. It was quiet now, calm, but the war wasn't over, because the next morning the police came again, and this time they had questions. I was in the middle of brewing coffee when the knock came. Sharp, rhythmic, and way too early for comfort. Through the frosted glass, I saw 2 figures in uniform. Not the same officers as before. These looked older, more serious. Mr. Turner? One said as I opened the door. Yes? We'd like to ask you a few questions. May we come in? I hesitated. A chill ran through me, not from the cold, but I stepped aside. They stood just inside the threshold, scanning the living room. I gestured toward the couch. They didn't. Sit. There's been a report, the first officer said, claiming you've been surveilling a neighbor, recording them without consent, sharing defamatory material in a public setting. There it was. Karen's counterattack. She filed a complaint? I asked. The second officer nodded. Yes. Says you doctored footage, used private information, harassed her online and during a public meeting. I let out a breath. I have proof, real proof, time-stamped footage, emails, HOA documents, everything I presented was real. They exchanged a glance. That's why we're here. We need to collect a statement and whatever documentation you can provide. so I handed over a USB drive. Another copy of everything. I'd prepared it days ago, just in case. She's retaliating, I said. Because the board voted to remove her, it was unanimous, she lost. The officer with the notebook nodded. We'll review everything, for now this is informal, but stay available in case we need further clarification. And just like that, they were gone. Luke came downstairs a few minutes later, yawning and scratching his head. Were those more cops? Yeah, I said, stirring sugar into my cup. Karen's trying to flip the narrative. He looked worried. Can she do that? Can she really get you in trouble? I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. Only if I stopped telling the truth. But the damage had already started. Within hours, a post appeared in the local Facebook group. Is this what we want in our neighborhood? A man filming women at night? Violating privacy in the name of Christmas? Anonymous, of course. But the comments poured in. Some believed her, some didn't. But the seed was planted. Karen wasn't trying to win. She was trying to exhaust me, to make the fight so toxic I'd back down. But she didn't know who I was. I'd survived real war zones. I'd fought bigger enemies than her. That night, Luke and I finished the rooftop lights, and I added something new, a giant lit-up sign in the front yard that said, "Truth isn't a violation." The next morning it was gone. Ripped out. Only the metal stakes remained. No note, no message, but on my porch was a box. Inside it, shredded pieces of my sign, and a copy of our HOA bylaws, burned at the edges. I checked the camera footage. The person wore gloves, hoodie, no face. But I knew it was her. She wanted me to feel unsafe. Instead, I filed a restraining order. Karen was served 2 days later. According to my neighbor, she screamed at the officer and tore the document in half right there on her porch. Let her rage. Let her scream. Because I was no longer playing defense. I was going to make her lies visible. Louder than her shouts. Brighter than my lights. And more permanent than anything she could ever erase. The restraining order didn't stop her. It only made her more creative. 2 nights later, Luke and I came home from his school play to find our mailbox stuffed. Not with mail, but with flyers, dozens of them. Poorly photocopied images of me. Speaking at the HOA meeting cropped to look angry. The caption, "Dangerous, dishonest, divisive." She'd passed them out too. Taped them to lampposts. Left them in mailboxes, even slid some under windshields around the neighborhood. It was textbook smear, trying to cast doubt by saturation. I wasn't shocked. I was disgusted. Luke picked one up, read it, then crumpled it and threw it in the trash. She's pathetic. She's scared, I replied. Because that's what this was. Fear disguised as fury. And she had reason to be afraid. Because 3 days from now, the city council would be reviewing our HOA's finances. The complaint wasn't just mine anymore. After the meeting, other homeowners had come forward. Turns out I wasn't the only one who noticed odd charges and missing funds. A quiet man named Greg had records going back 3 years. An elderly woman, Mrs. Ramirez, revealed she'd been fined for unregistered shutters that Karen later copied on her own house, without issue. The momentum had shifted, but Karen wasn't letting go quietly. That weekend, Luke came home from basketball practice with a fresh scratch on his cheek and fire in his eyes. What happened? I asked. Karen's grandson said you were a liar, said you ruined his grandma's life, then shoved me. I froze. Did you hit him back? No. Coach pulled us apart. Pride and rage mixed in my chest like oil and fire. She's involving kids now, I muttered. Luke sat at the kitchen table, pressing a cold pack to his face. Why is she so obsessed with us? I didn't answer right away, because deep down I knew the truth. Karen didn't just hate Christmas lights or reindeer or bylaws. She hated being powerless, and we'd taken her power. The city hearing was set for Tuesday night. I dressed in my best blazer, trimmed my beard, and loaded up a folder so thick it needed its own seatbelt. Luke insisted on coming. Are you sure? I asked. I want to see her face when you win. The council chamber was packed, not just with board members but with neighbors, people I barely knew, families, elderly couples, even a few teens holding homemade signs that said Honest HOA now, and Karen doesn't speak for us. When Karen walked in, her expression was different. Still smug, yes, but tight around the edges. Her blazer was the same red one from the meeting, like she was trying to reclaim her image, but she couldn't stop what came next. One by one, I laid out the evidence, inflated landscaping bills that went straight to a business her cousin owned, security camera installation that never happened but was paid for in full, hundreds of dollars in holiday event fees with no receipts. When I showed the footage of her trespassing at night, clipboard in hand on my property, the A room fell silent. Karen objected, of course, said it was fabricated, claimed I was out to destroy her. But then Greg stood up, then Mrs. Ramirez, then a woman from Elm Street who'd been fined for a child's bike on her porch, while Karen's son left his skateboard in the street every day. It was a slow collapse. Public irreversible. By the end of the hearing, the council had voted unanimously to audit the entire HOA. Karen's powers were suspended. A temporary president was appointed. She didn't even stay for the final vote. Just stormed out, red blazer flapping like a tattered flag of a fallen dictator. Luke and I drove home in silence. Not heavy, not awkward, just quiet peace. As we turned into the driveway, our Christmas lights blinked on automatically, warm, gentle, untouched. Luke broke the silence. So, that's it? Almost, I said, stepping out of the car. There's one last thing. Because I'd saved the best for last, the neighborhood Christmas party, organized by the interim HOA and Karen, uninvited. But I had something. Special planned, not to mock, not to gloat, but to remind her and everyone else what community really looked like. The next morning I didn't sleep. Not really. I just stared at the ceiling while the digital clock ticked away on my nightstand. Red numbers. 5 a.m. I'd memorized every crack in the ceiling paint by then. I brewed coffee, sat in my garage, with the door half open, watching the frost build up on the edges of the world. My fingers tapped the armrest of my chair like I was rehearsing something, because today wasn't just another round with Karen. Today was execution day. See, Karen made a mistake, and I finally had all the pieces I needed to take her down. Not just with words, with laws, with facts, with her own signature on things she pretended weren't real. The flash drive I carried in my coat pocket was now password protected, triple backed up, and ready. But I wasn't going to the courthouse. Just yet. No, I had one more move to play. A move she wouldn't see coming. At 8:12 a.m., I walked into city code enforcement. I wore my Sunday best. Slacks, shined boots, tucked-in shirt with a navy jacket. Looked like a guy applying for a permit, not a guy preparing to detonate a fake. HOA with one perfectly placed nudge. The man behind the counter was named Dave, probably mid-50s. Clean glasses. Eyes tired from years of paperwork. I didn't smile. Just said, "Hi, I think I might have received some fraudulent city violations. Can you help me verify something?" He squinted. Fraudulent? I laid the latest HOA violation Karen had taped to my door on the counter. The one she claimed came in cooperation with city zoning authority. His face changed. "This looks like one of ours, but..." He pointed. "The seal's wrong. And this signature? That's not from anyone in our department." Bingo. "Can I get that in writing?" I asked. He hesitated, but I explained the situation, calmly, that I believe someone in our neighborhood was impersonating city officials, and I needed documentation to protect myself and other homeowners. By the time I left, I had 2 printed letters signed by Dave. One, a statement that no official violations had been filed against my property. 2, confirmation that the attached notices had no legal basis. I walked out with my heart pounding. She was done. But I wasn't done yet. I emailed both letters to my lawyer, along with the documents Karen had left on my door, the fake HOA fee forms and the scanned newsletter she used to distribute enforcement updates. I titled the email, Fraud Evidence Packet, Karen T., Immediate Action Required. Then, I printed copies. Lots of them. Enough for every single resident on our block, and I made a new flyer. One that looked just like hers, but with a twist. Attention neighbors, your rights matter. This flyer was not sent by Karen. It was sent by Jack Turner, homeowner, U.S. Veteran and someone who believes in actual laws. Did you receive one of these HOA violation notices? Did you pay fees to a group calling themselves the neighborhood name Homeowners Association? Please read the attached letter from City Code Enforcement. You may have been misled. Let's talk. Sunday, 4 p.m. At my place. Bring your questions. We deserve the truth. By Saturday night, I had delivered 28 of them. Quietly. No confrontation. Just slipped into mailboxes and screen doors like she used to do. Only this time, the truth had a return address. Karen saw them first. Sunday morning, I caught her marching down the sidewalk like a queen denied her crown. She picked up one flyer off a neighbor's lawn, read it, and screamed. Yes, screamed. She tore the page in half, threw it in the street, stomped back toward her house, muttering words I didn't need to hear to understand, and I stood at my window, coffee in hand, watching. Let her boil. Let her panic. She had one day left. At 4 p.m. sharp, I opened my garage. 12 people came. That's 12 more than I expected. Some were couples, some single, some new parents with a baby monitor in hand. All quiet, all with wrinkled notices in hand, just like mine. Thank you for coming, I said. I'm Jack. I live 2 houses down from the flagpole. They nodded. I held up one of Karen's fake notices. This is not from the city, and this is not from any legal HOA. I passed around the letter from Code Enforcement. Let them read it. Then I explained, calmly, clearly, how a real HOA works. That it requires registration, bylaws, transparency, elections. Karen's setup? None of that. She had weaponized a neighborhood newsletter and intimidation into a system of fake authority. People's faces changed, eyes widened. One guy, Mr. Talbot, actually swore under his breath. She told me if I didn't repaint my garage door, I'd face legal action. A woman added. She fined me $250 for a plastic flamingo. I didn't interrupt. I let them vent. Let them feel the lie break inside their minds. When the wave of anger calmed, I said, here's what I'm doing. I've submitted a report to the city, and I'll be filing a formal complaint with law enforcement Monday morning. But if you'd like to join me, I'm collecting signatures to press charges as a group. Silence. Then one by one, they nodded, and by the end of the meeting, my sheet had 12 names. 12 people Karen no longer controlled. That night I received a knock. I opened the door. Karen stood there, face red, papers in hand, lip trembling, not with sadness but fury barely held in place. You think you're clever, don't you? She hissed. I didn't answer. She stepped forward, wagging her finger. You just made the worst mistake of your life, Turner. You don't understand how this neighborhood works? I looked her in the eyes and I said, no, Karen, you don't understand how laws work. Then I closed the door, locked it, and exhaled, because war was coming. But this time, I had the army. Monday morning came like a courtroom gavel. I was already dressed before the sun came up, pressed shirt, neatly knotted tie. Not because I had to, but because it made me feel sharp, like armor. I dropped my son off at school early, kissed his head, promised pancakes that night. Told him nothing about the storm that was about to break wide open in our neighborhood. Then I drove straight to the county clerk's office, where I had an appointment with a deputy district attorney. Her name was Elena Watkins, mid-30s, sharp suit, sharper eyes. She greeted me with a handshake and a clipboard. So, you're the guy with the fake HOA? I nodded, and I've got the paper trail to prove it. I laid it all out, every notice Karen had issued, every fee request that went into her personal Venmo. The city letter confirming the notices were forged, the testimonies from neighbors who had paid her, with screenshots, receipts, and time-stamped threats. And then, the final blow. The meeting we held Sunday, with 12 homeowners willing to sign a sworn affidavit. DA. Watkins flipped through the pages like she was reading a script for a courtroom drama. "This is good," she said. "Very good." I sat silent. She looked up. "You understand, this could go from civil to criminal. Fraud, impersonation of a government official, maybe even racketeering if the pattern holds." I nodded again. She tapped the stack. "I'll need to verify a few things, but Mr. Turner..." "Yes?" "Don't talk to her again. Let us handle it from here." By Tuesday, Karen's world began to cave in. It started with a knock at her door. Not from me. From two plainclothes detectives. They arrived mid-morning, quiet but firm. One neighbor caught it on their ring cam and sent me the footage. Karen answering in her bathrobe, flustered, trying to smile, but they weren't buying it. Within 2 hours, they'd taken a laptop, 2 phones, and several files from her office. Evening, the neighborhood chat group was on fire. Someone posted, "Anyone else see the cops at Karen's place today?" Another responded, "She said she was helping with an investigation but wouldn't say more." A third wrote, "She better be investigated. I want my money back." The tide was turning, and the queen of beige siding was drowning. But the biggest turn hadn't hit yet. Wednesday morning, I received a call from the local news station. "Hi, is this Jack Turner? We heard from the DA's office that you helped uncover a fraudulent HOA scam in your community. Would you be willing to speak on record?" I hesitated, not because I was scared, but because I knew this was it. Once my face hit the screen, there was no turning back. I wouldn't just be Jack. I'd be that guy who took on the HOA queen. Then I thought of my son, of what it meant to teach him about standing up for what's right. And I said yes. Thursday night, the segment aired. 6 minutes. Long, a montage of footage, close-ups of fake violation notices, interviews with 2 neighbors, faces blurred, a clip of me walking down the sidewalk, pointing at the spot where Karen used to tape her threats. The reporter ended with this. "Tonight, investigators are reviewing what could amount to tens of thousands of dollars in fraudulent charges, all collected under the banner of a fake HOA. But thanks to one determined homeowner, the community is now fighting back." This is Jessica Pine, Channel 8 News. I didn't celebrate. I sat in the dark, remote in hand, watching the replay over and over. And then, I received a text from an unknown number. "Nice show, Turner. Hope you're ready for what comes next." It wasn't signed, but I didn't need a signature. Karen had just declared her last stand. Friday afternoon it happened. My mailbox was ripped from the ground, screws torn out. The post snapped in half, my trash can flipped over, contents scattered across my lawn. A note was duct taped to my front window. "We don't want traitors in our neighborhood." Not I. We. That's when I realized something. Karen might be falling, but she wasn't falling alone. She had her inner circle, the ones who liked the fake power, the ones who got to bully people with her. And now they were retaliating. Not legally, not smartly, but with chaos. I installed new cameras that night. Bright, floodlights, motion sensors. Called the police, filed a report. But inside, I wasn't scared. I was boiling, because now it wasn't just about the fraud. They had brought it to my door, my home, my son's safety, and that was their biggest mistake. Saturday morning, I launched Phase 2. I met with a lawyer and filed a civil suit, not just against Karen, but against every name listed as board members in her newsletters, the guy who handled enforcement, the woman who sent fee reminders, the so-called treasurer. All of them were now on the hook, legally, financially, and reputationally. Then I did something bolder. I created a website, www.fakehofax.com. It laid everything out. The city documents, copies of notices, a timeline of events, and a FAQ titled, "Is your HOA real?" I linked it to my social media, sent it to every news contact who had messaged me after the story aired, and it caught fire. By Sunday, we had 23,000 visits. By Monday, it hit $100,000. I started getting emails from all over the country. My HOA tried this too. I thought I was alone. "Can you show me how you did it?" I had accidentally become the face of neighborhood resistance, and in doing so, I became Karen's worst nightmare. The final blow came 1 week later. A letter arrived in my mailbox, not fake this time, from the district attorney's office. "Dear Mr. Turner, after reviewing all submitted evidence and collecting formal statements from affected parties, we are officially pressing criminal charges against Karen T. and associated individuals." I stopped reading. My heart was thudding. In my chest, she was done. This wasn't a skirmish anymore. It was justice. Cold, sharp, and permanent. Karen had tried to weaponize fear, but she forgot something about guys like me. We don't scare easy. We plan. We wait, and then we strike. Karen was arrested on a Tuesday. The morning was quiet, overcast. Birds chirped like nothing was different. But I knew something had shifted, because at exactly 9:43 a.m., a black SUV pulled into her driveway, followed by 2 cruisers. 3 officers stepped out, one with handcuffs ready. Karen opened the door in her usual robe and curlers, the queen of faux authority in her morning regalia. I watched from my window. She tried to talk her way out of it, pointing, gesturing, clutching a folder like it held the answers. But the officers weren't buying it, and when they turned her around and clicked the cuffs onto her wrists, the silence on our street was deafening. Some neighbors peeked through blinds. One actually stepped onto their porch holding a mug of coffee mid-sip. No one said a word, because finally, the empress of HOA fiction had fallen. Later that day, I was called into the police station, not for questioning, for closure. "Detective," Ramos greeted me with a folder in his hand and a nod of respect. "You started something big, Mr. Turner," he said. "She wasn't just issuing fake fines, she was moving money." He laid out the evidence. Karen had collected over $72,000 in so-called fees over the past 2 years. None of it reported, none of it tracked, but it wasn't just the money. She had created a fake P.O. box, filed non-existent legal claims, and even threatened renters into leaving if they didn't comply. "She acted like a government agency," Ramos said. "That's a felony." My jaw clenched, and then he said the words that made it all worth it. "She's facing up to 15 years. But here's the part no one tells you. Justice feels quiet. It's not loud. It's not fireworks. It's not revenge porn and dramatic music. It's a signature on a form, a knock on a door, a silent ride in the back of a cruiser, and yet it changes everything. Because after that, people started talking to me differently. The same neighbors who used to avoid eye contact were now waving, thanking me, offering help with groceries. One even brought over lasagna. Homemade. Mr. Talbot, the guy with the flamingo, dropped by with a case of beer. From one guy who was sick of her crap to another, he said, "It wasn't a victory parade, but it was peace, and I hadn't had that in years." The following week, I attended Karen's arraignment, not because I had to, because I wanted her to see me there. The courtroom was small. No cameras. Just a judge, a stenographer, and a dozen people seated on worn benches. Karen entered in a tan jail jumpsuit, wrists shackled. Her eyes met mine. She looked older, smaller, stripped of that smugness she used to wear like perfume. Her lawyer tried to argue for bail. The judge denied it. "Flight risk, Your Honor. Evidence of intimidation and document forgery. Bail is denied." Bang of the gavel. Karen was escorted out. And for the first time in this entire war, I saw her afraid, not just cornered, broken, and I didn't smile, because I didn't need to. She knew what I'd done, And she knew I wasn't finished. Because here's the thing, fraud doesn't end with one arrest. Karen had cronies, silent supporters, people who enabled her while she bullied the rest of us, and I made it my mission to unmask every last one. Using the same newsletter format she used, I published a monthly community bulletin, the Real Homeowners Report. No threats, no fines, just facts. I shared updates on the investigation, steps homeowners could take to get their money back, resources for legal aid, and in the final section of each issue, a spotlight. Who helped her? This month's feature, Tom H., former compliance chair, who knowingly signed off on 19 fake violations. The response? Massive. People finally felt like they had power. Truth was contagious. By the third issue, we had a neighborhood meeting of real volunteers interested in forming a legitimate city-recognized HOA, one that actually protected homeowners, not to penalize them. Guess who they asked to chair the first committee? I said no, not because I didn't care, but because I was tired. This wasn't my identity. I didn't want to become the new Karen, just with nicer fonts. I just wanted my peace. So I helped them draft bylaws, set up their board, sat in the back row of the first meeting and listened. It was the first time in years I heard laughter on our block that didn't feel forced. The fear had lifted, the grip was broken, and I got to walk away knowing I didn't just win a battle, I changed the neighborhood. One afternoon, a week before Karen's sentencing hearing, my son came home from school with a crumpled art project. It was a drawing of our house. Snow on the roof, lights strung up on the eaves, a little stick figure with a cape standing on the lawn. He handed it to me and said, "That's you, fighting the bad guys." I stared at it for a long moment, because that's when I realized this wasn't about siding color or mailbox height. It was about boundaries. It was about dignity. It was about standing your ground when someone thinks they can walk through your life like they own it. And never, not for a second, letting them win. Karen's sentencing was held on a rainy Thursday. Gray skies, slick streets, the kind of weather that makes everything feel heavier, like the world's holding its breath. I showed up in the same navy jacket I wore the day I walked into code. Enforcement, no tie, just quiet resolve. My son was with his grandmother that day. He didn't need to see this. The courtroom was more crowded this time. Reporters, locals, a few familiar faces from our neighborhood. Karen sat between her lawyer and a bailiff. Her once perfect blonde hair was flat and unstyled. She looked hollow, not because she was sorry, but because her power was gone, and she didn't know how to exist without it. The judge recited the charges: fraudulent misrepresentation, impersonation of a public official, wire fraud, criminal coercion, unlawful collection of funds, aggravated harassment. Each one rang out like a bell tolling her downfall. Karen's lawyer requested leniency. He spoke of her community involvement, how she had led the neighborhood in times of uncertainty. I almost laughed, but the judge wasn't moved. He looked right at her and said, "You created a culture of fear under the guise of civic duty. You used fake authority to rob and intimidate your neighbors. You didn't just violate the law, you violated trust." Then he looked down at the paper. 4 years. State prison. Karen blinked, like she didn't quite hear it. Then her mouth opened. And for the first time, she didn't have a speech. Just a whisper. "No. No, you don't understand. I was the HOA." But no one responded. Because now, the truth had spoken, louder. I stepped outside the courthouse as the rain stopped. The sky had cracked open, soft blue behind fading clouds. I didn't celebrate. I just breathed. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Like I'd been holding it for 2 years and finally let go. That night, I walked the perimeter of my yard, checked the fence, the trees, the siding. My Christmas lights, yes, I'd kept them up late this year, still twinkled across the roof. But this time they weren't defiance, they were freedom. 3 weeks later, I got an envelope in the mail. Inside was a check. Partial restitution from Karen's seized assets. $5,200. Enough to fix the mailbox. Reseal the driveway. Maybe even take my son on that weekend trip we kept putting off. But I didn't cash it. Not yet. Instead, I made a copy and pinned it to my corkboard with a note underneath. What they took from you is not who you are. What you take back, and that's the story worth telling. 6 months passed, a lot changed. The new legitimate HOA was thriving. They chose a fresh name, held monthly meetings in the community center, and kept everything transparent. No more threats, no more fines, no more Karen. Every now and then someone would ask me if I missed the fight, if I missed the attention. But I never did. Because peace is louder when you've had to earn it, and I didn't need to win the war again. I just needed to make sure no one ever started it again. One evening in late spring, I was setting up a barbecue in my backyard when a voice called over the fence. "Hey, Jack." It was Lisa, the woman who brought lasagna the week Karen was arrested. She smiled and held up a plate of lemon bars. "For the neighborhood hero." I laughed. "I'm no hero." She leaned closer. "You lit up her fraud, Jack." "Literally." Then, she pointed to the lights still hanging across my patio. "Funny thing," she said. "Those lights got you a 911 call, and a revolution." And maybe she was right. Because that's the thing about light, it doesn't just decorate, it exposes. And in the end, that's all I ever wanted. To see clearly again. To help others do the same. To remind every Karen out there. Some of us don't bend. Some of us fight back. Some of us don't just get mad. We get even.